Hello, everyone, and welcome to May's edition of the Lunchtime Learning webinar series. My name is Brendan Woodruff. I'm the Director of Sustainability here at DEC and a co-chair of the Green New York Council. Happy to welcome you to this month's edition. A couple housekeeping notes as we get started here today. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on the Green New York website. I'll put a link in the chat. You can also see recordings of all of our previous webinars there and also register for upcoming ones. Everybody is also muted upon entry, so if you do have questions as we go along today, please type them into the chat box. We will get to all questions at the end, so as you think of them, type them into the chat box and we'll get to them. I also want to announce that we have the next 5 months of Lunchtime Learning webinars finalized. So our upcoming schedule is as follows. On June 14th, we have Gardening in Containers 101 as a follow-up from our very popular backyard vegetable gardening one. This one for folks who might have less room. July 12th, we have Minimizing Packaging While Shopping. August 9th is going to be Native Lawn Planting. September 13th is going to be Greening Your Home Office. And October 11th is going to be Electric Micro Mobility, focusing on e-bikes and e-scooters. So really great lineup coming up. You can register for all of those on the Green New York website. And without further ado, I want to introduce Clifton Staples from DEC's Office of Climate Change. He works on the Climate Smart Communities program, which is an absolutely fantastic program. One of the things that I really enjoy about it is both that it's a blueprint for action at the local level when it comes to our municipalities, and it also, in many instances, gives folks a way to get involved in their communities and in taking action on climate change. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Cliff.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. Thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak today. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, you're good to go.
Awesome. Yeah, so as Brendan mentioned, my name is Cliff Staples. I work at the Office of Climate Change on the Climate Smart Communities program. Before I dive into the kind of program-specific stuff with Climate Smart Communities, how you can get involved with the program, I want to give a little bit of background on New York's Climate Act, otherwise known as the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And I want to do this because not everyone has heard of it, but it's something that's really important for climate action at the state level, and it's something that is really shaping a lot of the programs and agencies that deal with climate change and stands to do so, for the next few decades, really setting the tone for what we're doing. So if I can, just walk you all back to 2019, specifically the summer of 2019, when the Climate Act was passed in New York State. At the time, at the federal level, there was a lot of talk going around in Congress about this concept of a Green New Deal, uh, which I think there are a number of definitions, but simply put, it's any kind of piece of legislation that focuses on climate action and climate justice, specifically the core principles of green jobs, climate justice, and climate change action. So it didn't really gain as much traction in 2019 at the federal level as it could have, but just a few months later, New York State passed the Climate Act, which, while it's not doesn't reference this specifically, in some ways is New York's version of a Green New Deal. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about that, some of the mandates that are in place, because in a lot of ways, this is laying out our goals for climate change in New York State for, the next 20, 30 years and beyond. So getting to that, I first want to talk about, what are those goals in respect to climate change, greenhouse gas emissions reductions that come along with this 2019 Climate Act. So the two big ones are our economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions reductions and the goals for those. The first being an 85% emissions reduction by 2050. This is a mandate of the Act. And what that is based on is 85% emissions reductions in respect to the 1990 baseline, which is basically, how much were we outputting as a state across the entire economy in terms of greenhouse gases in 1990? We want to reduce that by 85% by the year 2050. So that is the big goal. There's also an interim goal of a 40% emissions reductions by 2030. And then we also have some electricity generation sector specific goals, 100% zero carbon by 2040. And zero carbon in this case includes things like hydro and nuclear, but then the interim goal of 70% renewable electricity by 2030, which would exclude nuclear and hydro, I believe. So these are our goals. They're really mandates of this Climate Act, pushing state agencies and all the programs to pull together to meet these. Um, it would represent a really radical transformation of our economy and our emissions profile here in New York State. And these are really tremendously ambitious goals and right in line with the climate science, what we need to do to get climate change under control. But in addition to, these really kind of climate science focused goals, the Climate Act also has a very strong climate justice component, which, is so important for any Green New Deal style of legislation. In our case, one of the primary mechanisms by which we will achieve climate justice in New York State with the Climate Act is that the Act mandates that 40% of the benefits of transitioning away from fossil fuels in New York State need to go to what the state is calling disadvantaged communities. And I'll kind of break this down piece by piece for you because it can be a little challenging to understand, and I don't think people understood it when they wrote it, but we're figuring that out. We're, getting draft definitions of all these things up. So to break this down, 40% of benefits to disadvantaged communities. Disadvantaged communities just means, you know, those folks in New York State who have been historically disadvantaged, whether that's because they have a disproportionate vulnerability to things like flooding or extreme heat, what have you, or folks who have been marginalized in the environmental decision-making process. Benefits to those folks in New York State really means state funding, um, and program monies that are spent in those areas of clean energy, greenhouse gas mitigation, the kinds of things that the Climate Act deals with. So this is, in many ways, it's a really direct way of channeling state monies for climate action to the folks who need it most and who have been historically, the most disadvantaged when it comes to things like climate vulnerability. So that's a huge part of the legislation. In addition to that, there is a call for pilot community air monitoring programs uh, in several locations across the state, which is, a really big environmental justice, climate justice issue. As we are, uh, generating all of this electricity in New York State currently, a lot of it still comes from fossil fuels, particularly natural gas, and oftentimes those natural gas-fired power plants are located in communities of color, disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, what have you. So getting these community air monitoring programs up and running is a really big deal for a lot of environmental justice advocates out there. And then last but not least, the Climate Act itself calls for a participatory process to implement the mandates and the goals of the Act. And the primary mechanism by which this happens is through the Climate Justice Working Group, which was established, who have helped to define things like disadvantaged communities, benefits to those communities, and who have provided recommendations on the state's plan to meet these ambitious goals. So that's just a little bit of background on, this kind of really big, ambitious piece of legislation that's been shaping a lot of, conversations at the state level when it comes to climate change. But I want to dive down now into, our specific program here at the Office of Climate Change, the Climate Smart Communities program. And I think it's actually really important that we have programs like the Climate Smart Communities program to meet these goals that the state is setting forth. What we're really talking about here are big transitions to our economy, the way we live our lives, our society, everything. It's going to take a lot of radical transformation, but I don't think you're going to have that without, buy-in at the local level, the grassroots level, people getting involved in local government and local governments making the decision that this is important, that climate change mitigation and adaptation is something that we really need to prioritize. Um, and I think in many ways, that's where the Climate Smart Communities program comes in because it's state support for that local grassroots level of climate action. So I want to tell you a little bit about our programs. You can kind of think of them in two branches. We have our funding programs on the one hand, uh, our Climate Smart Communities Grants program. We also have a zero emission vehicles and EV charging infrastructure rebate program. That's the funding side. In addition to that, we also have what I think a lot of people are familiar with is the Climate Smart Communities Municipal Certification Program, which is a leadership recognition program by which municipalities that have taken climate action, either to mitigate or adapt to climate change, document that action, upload it to our website, and then receive certification. And this is it's a voluntary, no fees program, this certification program. It's sponsored by 7 New York State agencies, of which the Department of Environmental Conservation is kind of the administrator. A lot of people think of it as a DEC program. It's not just DEC, there are a lot of people involved in this behind the scenes. And I want to tell you a little bit about, what that process is actually like, from a municipality's perspective, before I, give you some clues as to how you can get involved at the local level with your municipal government. So getting into it, uh, first step in our certification program for municipalities is to become a registered climate smart community. Before you can be certified, you have to be registered. And municipalities do this by passing a resolution, taking a pledge, what we call the Climate Smart Pledge, that contains these 10 pledge elements that you see on the screen in front of you. And you can kind of think of these as, the broad categories under which all of the 100 plus actions within our certification program are housed. And this is, really the bread and butter of climate work at the local level. Doing inventory emissions, you can see there in Pledge Element 2, enhancing community resilience there in Pledge Element 7. So it's really as simple as a municipality including this pledge in a resolution that they pass by a vote at your town hall meeting, your village board meeting, whatever it might be, getting the clerk to sign off on that resolution, after which the community is considered a registered climate smart community. And they can then move on to working with our Climate Smart Communities portal website to become certified. To give you a little impression of what that actually looks like, here's an example from our website, a look into one of the pledge elements. As I mentioned, these are, you can kind of think of them as categories under which all of the more specific actions are living. And this is a little snapshot of pledge element 4, shift to clean renewable energy. Underneath that drop-down menu, if you were to go to our portal website, you would see all of the actions that have to do with clean renewable energy. In this case, a renewable energy feasibility study is an action that a municipality could take. And if they were to do so, it would earn them 3 points, which sort of brings me to the method by which communities actually achieve certification. Every action within our program is associated with a certain point value. Sorry. And a municipality has to receive over a certain point threshold, after which they are considered certified. So let's get a kind of a visualization of what all of this stuff actually looks like. So here's our map of all of our registered and certified communities across New York State. We currently have 356 registered communities. Those are communities that have taken the pledge, but they haven't quite got around to getting enough documents together to become certified. And we currently have 90 certified climate smart communities. These are, the real leaders who have taken the time, they've gathered up all their documents about all the great climate work they've done. They've submitted it to our website and they've achieved over 120 points for bronze certification, which is our entry level of certification, or they have achieved over 300 points for silver certification, which is currently the highest level in the program. All right. So I think you can probably get the impression now that this is actually, it represents a lot of work for municipalities. Oh, thank you, Brendan. Yep, that's the website if you want to check that out. Uh, so, it is a lot of work for communities, getting all of these documents together, taking new actions or documenting actions that the community has already done. It can take some communities years, especially smaller communities, to get all of this information together and make their case and then submit it to us at the Office of Climate Change to review. So, you know, what are the benefits of doing that? If it takes so long, why do it? Well, um, I have a long list here, but I kind of want to go through this point by point because different communities get different things out of the program. It is very flexible with over 100 different actions. Um, we do have priority actions and a couple of mandatory actions, but it really is more of like a menu. You can do what you want with it. Um, and I think the number one benefit um, of that for communities is that actually, if you were to go on our portal website, you would receive a lot of free technical assistance, guidance, and tools just by going in and looking at those specific actions. If you were to click on any one of the actions on our portal website, it wouldn't just be a list of requirements for the documents that we need to see from you. It would also be links to resources, an explanation of the best practices for how to do this plan or how to implement this project in your community. It really is, I think, a repository, of the best and brightest minds at the 7 agencies who sponsor this, and all of the information that they've gathered on these specific actions and laid out there for communities to access easily, just with the website itself. In addition to that sort of base level free technical assistance that you get, there is obviously the leadership recognition that comes with becoming a certified community. Uh, when a community becomes certified, there's often a press event. They get a number of signs they can hang up in their community, declaring to the world that they are bronze certified, that they're silver certified, whatever it might be. Um, we often try to get state officials out to those press events themselves, where the municipal officials and volunteers go. Sometimes the governor shows up, not always, I can't promise that, or the lieutenant governor, sometimes the DEC commissioner, which provides a networking opportunity, I think, for municipal governments and municipal officials. There is the funding aspect, which I think is a benefit. It's not it's not a direct kind of one for one. You get certified, you get money, or you complete an action, you get a grant for that action. But in many ways, going through the process of certification, completing actions, gathering up documents, it puts communities in a better position to compete for our competitive grants, which I'll get into in a minute. Uh, and I think last but not least, a lot of communities have, come to me with this feedback that they just appreciate having a roadmap. I think Brendan talked about this a little bit earlier. In many ways, it's a blueprint for, what a community can do at the local level if the municipal officials and the community members themselves are passionate about climate change. We have a list of priority actions. We have a list of actions where you can get a lot of points, actions where you can get a few points. So it is really a prioritization of climate change mitigation and adaptation actions, and just a really nice kind of roadmap for how do you actually do this work. Because a lot of municipalities that do this or that pursue certification, they're really at the beginning of this journey for adapting and mitigating climate change at the local level. And then, as Brendan mentioned, it is also a really great way for community members to get involved in climate work at the local level. And actually, a lot of the times, certification or registration efforts start with local advocates, volunteers, passionate community members who really care about these issues and want their municipal government to do something about it. And I can think of one really cool example where we actually had, I think, a group of high school students who were really passionate about climate change, and they were the ones who pushed their local government to pursue certification, going so far as to actually help them gathering documents up. So that was a pretty cool application for me to review because they talked about that process. But as an individual, things that you can do, you can advocate for your local government to take this pledge saying, hey, we think climate change is important. Here's the roadmap that I think we need to follow to mitigate and adapt to climate change. If your community is already registered, one of, or rather our two mandatory requirements are that the municipal government creates what we call the CSC task force. They're the ones who, do a lot of the work, gathering the documents, and also appoints a CSC coordinator. Oftentimes those task forces and that coordinator, they're volunteers. They're people who, maybe they sit on the planning committee. Maybe they, attend a lot of town meetings. They're involved and they want to become further involved in climate work at the local level. You can join your CSC task force and help your municipality move towards climate change mitigation and adaptation work in a really meaningful way. So it's a cool way to get involved in your community. I've sat in on one of these task force meetings in the town where I used to live, and it can be, pretty fun, and you can learn a lot this way about climate change. Okay, moving to the fun bit, maybe for some folks, if you care about this kind of stuff, the funding and technical assistance. Uh, as I've mentioned a couple times now, we have uh, two sort of in-house grant programs. We have the eponymously named Climate Smart Communities Grants Program, which has handed out, I think, something around over $50 million since 2016. This is a competitive grants program. You have to be a local government to apply. It has a 50-50 match component and provides, a decent chunk of money every year for climate change adaptation and mitigation projects at the local level. We also have a municipal zero emission vehicle program, our ZEV rebate and ZEV infrastructure rebate program, which gives local governments, again, you have to be a local government to apply for this, but it gives those governments funding to install EV charging stations and to move over municipal fleet vehicles to electrified vehicles. Here's an example of some of the grant projects that were eligible for funding in 2021. This is specifically a snapshot of some of the more planning-oriented actions. And you can see it's kind of cool. These are really just taken directly from our Climate Smart Communities certification program. This is how the names of those actions appear on our portal website. So you can see, great basic climate change work going on here with, climate action plans, greenhouse gas inventories, climate vulnerability assessments, natural resource inventories, a lot of awesome projects. In addition to our funding programs and the technical assistance and information and resources you get access to looking just on the portal website, we are also in the process of rolling out a statewide Climate Smart Communities Coordinators program. Um, these coordinators will be contractors to us. They will be regionally located contractors, and they will be out in the field working with local governments, working with climate smart communities, task forces to generate excitement about climate work, to connect them to available resources for registration, for certification, building relationships with those local governments. And this is going to be a $3.1 million funded effort on an annual basis coming from the state's Environmental Protection Fund. So watch out for this. It's currently rolling out now. And as I mentioned, those coordinators are going to be located sort of on a regional basis with 3 regions across the state, a western zone, eastern zone, and a downstate zone. So every municipality hopefully should have access to this soon. And just before I wrap up, I also wanted to draw your attention to a kind of related state program. This is not a DEC program. It's a New York State Energy Research and Development Authority program, NYSERDA, that you can kind of think of as a like a sister or a cousin to CSC, and that is the Clean Energy Communities, CEC program, which is much more narrowly focused on energy use, as the name would suggest. It is a municipal certification program, like Climate Smart Communities certification program, but it has a much smaller list of actions. I think there's 10 high impact actions that communities can take. And the way I think of it is it's kind of a smaller program that's nested within climate smart communities. There's a lot of interplay actually between the two, to the point where, every one of the clean energy communities actions is a climate smart communities action, and then becoming a certified climate smart community is one of those 10 high impact actions with CEC. So a lot of communities, they pursue this at the same time. Maybe they begin with one and then they start on another one. Um, but they're really compatible state programs. Uh, okay, I will leave you all with some links to our portal website. If you're interested in getting involved, these links are a great place to start getting a little bit more detailed information on climate smart communities. I will also say, I don't know that there are any municipal governments out in the audience here today, but just in case, I did want to say that our latest round for Climate Smart Communities grants is currently open. Um, so something to look out for if you are a representative of a municipal government. But thank you all for listening to my presentation. I'm happy to open it up now to questions from the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Cliff. That was a fantastic overview of the program and right on time. So I give you props for that as well.
Yeah.
So folks, if you do have questions, please type them into the chat box here. We're going to go through some, but we do have additional time for questions, so please type any that you have. The first one here is, do you have any kind of rough estimate of how many municipalities that take the pledge move on to becoming registered or certified?
Hmm. I'm not sure specifically. Um, you know, Anecdotally, I would say it's kind of all over the map. We have communities who have been registered for years. This program's been around for a long time, um, and who have never pursued certification. It kind of seems like they've forgotten about it. We have other communities who register and then they immediately start working on certification. So it really is kind of all over the map.
Mhm. Yep. So another question here, what about New York City? They saw on the map that they are not part of the program.
Yep, yep, we get that question a lot. It's interesting. You would think that the city would be a certified or registered climate smart community, but they are not. Um, that has to do a little bit with the way the program is set up. Uh, Basically, to take the climate smart communities pledge, a resolution has to be passed, including the 10 pledge elements, by the highest governing body of the municipality, right? So for most local governments, that's pretty simple to figure out, right? It's the county government, it's the town government, it's the city government, whatever it might be. New York State, New York City is so large, you know, we have had, individual boroughs be interested before, but to actually pass the pledge, because it has to be the highest governing body, New York City's, the Common Council, whatever it might be, they would be the ones that would have to pass the pledge, which, that has never had interest from that larger governing body. I'm not really sure why, but yeah, that hasn't happened.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. So I guess that kind of gets into the next question here, is if are there resources out there, folks, that people should talk to before they talk to their local officials if they're in a municipality that has yet to take the pledge or become registered. So
Mm,
resources out there, or talking points, or other things that folks could learn from before they approach their elected officials.
absolutely. I think actually the portal website is a great place to start. Some of those links that I've included on this page here are just a great place to get some more background information. Uh, if you're someone who's already, pretty involved at the local level, um, you could probably pretty easily go through the list of actions and say, hey, I know we have this, we've done that. Um, that's a good place to start if you're, someone who is involved in local government. There are also clean energy communities coordinators who assist local governments with, that kind of entry level, getting acquainted with the Climate Smart Communities program. And I hope in the future, our own Climate Smart Communities regionally located coordinators, who I mentioned a little bit earlier, who will be able to do some of that kind of introductory work as well. But those are my suggestions at the moment. I might be able to find a link to those clean energy communities coordinators, but I would have to dig around.
Mhm. And I did just put in the chat here a two-page introduction to the program that you can download from the Climate Smart Communities website, and that'll give you some more information there as well.
Yeah.
So the next question here, are there preferred vendors that Climate Smart Communities partners with for projects for municipalities?
Okay. I think the short answer is no. I assume the question has to do with our grants program and selecting contractors for either planning or implementation actions. Uh, we don't have a list of preferred vendors for that work that I'm aware of.
And another question here, is there a place on the website that lists the folks in each community that are working with their municipality for the Climate Smart Communities program and getting certified so that they know who to contact? So, for example, I'm assuming this person is asking about like the person in the city government that works on this. Is there a program contact or the office that works on it?
So I don't think there's anything like that that is publicly available. Um, Basically, the way the process works is, a community sets up a, their own sort of portal user page, basically, and those are attached to certain email addresses within the municipality. But I don't think that information is publicly available for folks to look at. Um, Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's any like person-specific information that I can think of. You can go through and um, even if you just start on our landing page with one of those links here, the participating communities page, you can see if your community is registered or certified. And if you click on your community's little blip on the map, you can look at their certification report if they are certified. So that can provide some additional information if you're just not sure, where your community is at in the process or if they've even begun it. Uh, but yeah, person specific, I don't think so.
Mhm. So another question that came in here, how much of an incentive is increased points in the grant program for municipalities that seek certification or are certified?
Okay, yeah. I'll say it's a small bump for certified communities who then afterwards apply for our grants. Um, it's a small bump. Yeah.
Yep. So another question here, and I guess this is one that usually comes up when we're talking kind of climate or climate politics. Are there any municipalities that have repealed the pledge? Or have you seen any that have kind of gone backwards if there's a change in town board or city council or something like that?
If they have, I don't think they've told us that they've repealed their resolution. I would be sad. Yeah, I'd be sad to hear it if they did, but if that's happened, it hasn't been brought to our attention. I don't know that they would tell us, right? If they did that.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. And that's, we're kind of marching forward here on a lot of this stuff, so that's really good. Another question is, do you know if other states have similar programs, or is New York unique with having this?
No, actually, a lot of states do, and our Climate Smart Community Certification Program is modeled after New Jersey's Sustainable Jersey program. Uh, there is also there's actually a national network of state certification programs similar to Climate Smart Communities that members of our team are a part of and we attend meetings of. So yeah, there are a lot of similar programs to Climate Smart Communities. They're not all structured the same. They're not all housed in state agencies, for instance. They don't all have grant programs associated with them. Um, but yeah, the Sustainable States Network, you can check that out to see, all the states who have programs in the style of Climate Smart Communities. But our nearest neighbors, Sustainable Jersey and Sustainable Connecticut, if you're interested in checking those out, those are really similar to Climate Smart Communities in a lot of way. Actually, we share some of our website DNA with them, so it might look kind of familiar if you were to go and check those out.
That's fantastic. And that's really good to hear that other states are leading on this as well.
Mhm.
So could a school district or a school district public library become a member of the program or participate?
At this time, no. You have to be considered a local government.
Okay. Do you know if there's any programs out there for school districts in New York State in terms of kind of taking a climate smart pledge or anything like that?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. People are coming up with policy ideas here.
Yeah.
I
I
know the
think
New,
that's
yeah.
something that we have been asked a lot, like can fire districts, can school districts, join or apply for grants, for instance.
Mhm.
And, right now, according to our policy, no. According to actually the statute that, created our programs, no, they can't. But yeah, we do get asked that quite a bit.
Mhm. And we just had somebody enter in the chat here that there is a program through NYSERDA, the P12 Clean Green Schools Initiative. So I'm going to put a link to that in the chat for everybody. So there is a NYSERDA program that focuses on school districts.
Very cool. Thanks for the
And
information.
yeah, and if you do have any more questions, please type them into the chat box. We do have a little bit more time here um, for questions. One more that I do have here is, do you have any examples of interesting projects that climate smart communities have done or undertaken that you think are notable, especially interesting?
That's We have so many. We fund a lot of projects every year. I assume this is maybe more of a grants question, because we fund a ton of these every year. We do lots of sidewalk projects, lots of transportation related projects. We fund a lot of really awesome, climate action plans, comprehensive plans that focus on climate change and sustainability. I don't have any really specific ones that I just have at the top of my mind. Uh, but again, you can actually go into those certification reports if you click on a community for the participating communities page and see everything that they've done, all of the documentation that they've uploaded. You can look at, neighboring communities around your community. If they have been certified, you can see what they've done. Uh, or oftentimes actually have a lot of certified counties, so you can see what your county has done if they are on that list of certified communities.
Okay, awesome. And with that, I think we've come to the end of what we have here question-wise. So I always ask folks, is there anything that you wish people had asked you that they didn't yet, or anything additional that you'd like to add for folks?
Sorry, was that for me? Was that for
For
me?
you, yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, nothing additional. Just thank you folks for coming out. Much more of a turnout than I thought would be here. So yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah, and I'll just end this here by saying, I think this is a fantastic program, not only for what it's doing for municipalities, but the fact that it allows people to get involved as well, whether through talking to their local elected officials about the program and letting them know that they like to see municipalities participating in it, or being involved with the Climate Smart Communities Task Force. So take a look at the map, go to the website. If your community is a part of it, see how you can get involved. If your community is not, take a look at the resources and see, if there's folks you might want to talk to about that. Because a lot of times it's that kind of grassroots, communications with the local elected officials that lead to climate action. I know we've talked about that on previous webinars. So this is a great way to get involved. So make sure you do it. So again, one last final announcement here. Our next webinar is going to be on June 14th, and it's going to be Gardening in Containers 101. That should be a fun one. So we'll see everybody then. Thank you again, Cliff. And thanks everybody for being on.
Thanks, Brendan. I'll just drop the link in the chat one more time, just if you want to see if your community is already participating.